What's up guys, Sean here, and today we're going to talk about the transgender wrestling champion. Okay, so this technically qualifies as an update to a previous video I did on my channel. I actually covered Mack Beggs before. However, the reason Beggs is in the news again is because Mack Beggs once again won the Texas State Wrestling Championship for girls. Mack Beggs is a female to male transgender, which means that Mack Beggs is taking testosterone injections to become more masculine. Beggs could not be barred from competing because the testosterone, while it is a performance-enhancing drug, was prescribed by a doctor to treat a medical condition. Now, as we discussed last year, Beggs wanted to wrestle against boys because Beggs identifies as a boy. However, in Texas, they decided that your biological sex determines where you go. So what essentially happened here is that there are two rules that are inherently in conflict. According to the state of Texas, you compete in a sport based on your biological sex. However, according to federal law, it's discrimination against anybody with a medical condition to bar them from competing in a competition due to something prescribed by a doctor. And by the way, this does not only apply to transgender people. If you were asthmatic and you needed to take some kind of a steroid to overcome your asthma, even though that steroid might be a performance-enhancing drug that would normally disqualify you from a competition, in this particular case, you would be allowed to compete with that steroid in your body. So on paper, everything appears to be on the up and up. However, in practice, you have a biological girl taking a performance-enhancing drug and completely obliterating the competition to win back-to-back state championships. Mack Beggs sports a 32-0 record in girls wrestling, and if you needed an image to kind of like cement what it looks like to have a girl that's hopped up on testosterone wrestling other girls, here's one for you. I'm sure you've heard the phrase that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I can only think of one word when I look at this picture, and that word is progress. Isn't it so progressive that Mack Beggs got the chance to beat up on other girls who don't have nearly the hormonal advantage that Mack Beggs has? Isn't that progress? Isn't that much better? Alright, but in all seriousness, this seems like a no-win option, although in my last video I did provide a solution to this problem, and I will restate that solution for you a little bit later in this video. But right now, I mean, come on, look at this. This doesn't look right. And to be fair, while it is the progressive left that is pushing transition on underage kids, it wasn't the progressive left that said that this person had to wrestle girls. Mack Beggs wanted to wrestle boys, and basically what the state of Texas decided was that if they let Mack Beggs wrestle boys, then they have to let biological boys wrestle girls, and you would end up with a similar outcome if that were the case. And I actually pointed out in my last video on this topic that if you ended up doing something like that, you could end up in a situation where many of the scholarships that usually go to biological females would end up going to transgenders, people who are biologically male. Because biological males have an unfair advantage when competing against women. They typically have more bone density. They'll typically have 30 to 40% more upper body strength on average. And when you factor in how much easier it is for a biological male to build muscle mass, that gap's only going to widen with more training and exercise. So while I understand where the state of Texas is coming from, and I also understand where Mack Beggs is coming from, I wouldn't say the solution is as easy as just letting people compete in whatever gender group that they think that they are. And this is why I came up with a way better solution. Basically, the way this works is that if you are in the female bracket, you are a biological female only. If you take testosterone to elevate to transition to a man, then you are eligible to compete in the male bracket. Because the male bracket really shouldn't be the biological male bracket. The male bracket should be the best people possible bracket. Contrary to popular belief, most major male sports leagues don't have any rules that specifically bar females from competing against the men. It just so happens that when you're at the peak of like athleticism, you tend to be a man. But if there was a woman who was theoretically capable of competing in baseball or basketball or football, and she could do the job, I would totally be on board with it, regardless of whether or not that person's transitioning. So to me, the solution to this has always been pretty simple. If you want to compete with the men, whether you're a biological female who wants to stay a biological female who wants to transition to a male, or if you're a man trying to transition to a woman, you have to compete in the male bracket. Because the male bracket is just like the better athlete bracket. But if you want to compete in female sports, you have to be a biological female and you can't take anything that like amps your athletic performance so far above other biological females. To me, I think the solution is pretty obvious, and I think it's incumbent upon the state of Texas to create a system like this so you don't end up in a scenario where you have Mack Beggs just fucking sweeping through the wrestling championship and then getting booed by the crowd at the end. According to Mack Beggs and Mack Beggs' family, Mack wanted to compete against the men, and as long as Mack can qualify based on the weight division, I see no problem in letting Mack do so. It's very different when you have somebody hopped up on testosterone competing against women, or somebody with the advantages of a biological man competing against women. Look, I know a lot of people have just like the biological fact-based version of gender and sex. There are two sexes, you are born into the sex, and your gender always matches your sex, no matter what you do to yourself. And while nobody can actually dispute the biological differences between men and women, we live in a world where there are discrimination lawsuits, and entire programs can be shut down if you try to stick to them so rigidly. And as we've seen with the Mack Beggs case, if you compromise the wrong way, you end up with a bad solution. So why not go with my solution and make things a little more fair and make things a little more logical and workable in the current system? If you remove the gender barrier in men's sports, then you will have no issue with this because you can prove it out in court that biological males are different from freaking biological females and better in terms of athletics on average. And you could prove that there is an increased danger from biological women wrestling people that are hopped up on testosterone or wrestling people that are biological males competing against normal, natural-born females. To me, it makes a lot of sense, and considering that we have to play the hand that we're dealt, it's the best solution under the circumstances, because you really can't create a system where you're discriminating against people with medical conditions. That's never going to work out for you. Your school's going to end up getting sued, and instead of having Mack Beggs be the wrestling champion or be an average wrestler against boys, you're going to end up in a system where Mack Beggs is going to be a multi-millionaire because Mack Beggs is going to win a freaking lawsuit in federal court and take the taxpayers for a ride. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Let me know what you think about this topic in the comments down below. I want to give a special thank you to Eric, who came on my live stream on Saturday. I was advised not to leave that stream up because of reasons that we actually discussed on the stream itself, but I really appreciate your support, and it was really cool just to have a viewer on. Speaking of which, I want to thank my patrons, Pepe Loves Trump, Mike Barbarossa, Michael, Apollo Legend, and my first patron ever, Louis Cool Dance. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. This has been me talking about the transgender state wrestling champion. Till next time.